Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Founder Files. Today, I've got a very uniquely South African story for you, but one that's also quite complex because they're doing some pretty complex things, and that is Sebenza. If you haven't heard of Sebenza, well, they have 5 million unique users on their platform, and that's just the number that they registered in 2024. The business is 5 years old, and essentially how it works is they provide Wi-Fi routers onto taxis and buses. They've got over 8,000 of them now, and they provide access to the internet and content for free to users in exchange for participating in any form of media, whether it's consuming an ad, filling out a survey, and their ability to access this ecosystem. Obviously, the whole point of the podcast, we get a lot more depth into towards understanding what they've built. Very useful to understand anyone participating in marketplace linking, B2B, B2B2C kind of business models. And we really just navigate how they were able to find the fit in the markets, this balance between software and hardware, where they invested their effort, how they navigated the complexity of building these offerings, getting the business model right, but also just operationally having this much hardware in so many different places geographically, how they navigate that and maintenance with such a lean team. We talk about a very unique problem that they have is optionality, is the fact that they've been able to unlock an ecosystem and problem where they can add so much value to so many other people, and that their options for growth feel almost endless right now. There's a joke that we spoke about during the podcast of 9 bubbles sitting on the whiteboard next to Calvin around what they're going to be doing. So in terms of scaling and complexity and having loads of different things that can be done, these guys have been able to unlock an entire ecosystem, and how they're scaling this is absolutely fascinating. So this is definitely something that you want to tune on for. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce you to Calvin and Wes. Welcome to The Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Calvin and Wes from Sebenza, welcome to the Founder Files. When I did the pre-research on your company and knowing the kind of reach that you have, I was so impressed by seeing on your website 135 million ads served to date. And Wes, apparently that's well wrong. So I think just to kick it off, welcome to the podcast. And please just educate us on what kind of scale you're at as a business right now.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Cam. So I think those do need to be updated on the website, but what we typically see now, we're in about 8,000 vehicles, unique reach of about 800,000 users a month, and that's scaling. So in 2024, we had around 5 million unique users on our platform in total, and we serve around 30 to 35 million ad units a month at this stage.
That's absolutely nuts. And just for the context there, when did you start the business? Like, what was the time frame that you've gotten from zero to there?
So 2019 is the really when we started getting stuck in, developing the idea and building that out. But the advent of COVID really gave us the opportunity to focus on this. I think is always the chapter, pre-COVID and post-COVID in our case is exactly the same. And so the focus on the digitization of this industry and the opportunity there really came to the front there from about 2021.
Awesome. I think we've done enough teasing of the audience to show what you've been able to do in the span of 5 years in terms of those numbers. Just actually, can you explain what the business and business model of Sebenza is?
We are a platform for commuters. The platform is freely available in taxis and buses, and the platform is served through Wi-Fi. Right, so we've got devices in these vehicles, and you connect to the device, connect to the Wi-Fi, the platform pops up, and you have to engage with us. You get to engage with all the content, the games, the news, and then you also earn Sebenza bucks. That's our rewards currency that we have on the platform. So as you engage with the platform, you earn Sebenza bucks, and you can use that currency to get Wi-Fi. And so it's a free Wi-Fi as the main reward, but actually it's a platform for commuters, and that's the basis in which we add value to the industry as a whole.
So I'm curious to obviously get deeper into the platform with like who your customers are, but just from my understanding, it's the same as essentially logging into any kind of Wi-Fi hotspot. I'd imagine at like a restaurant or at an airport is probably a good example. there's an interface for me to go into. But the difference between what you've done and what they've done is, instead of having necessarily free access or tokenized access or purchased access, you've gamified that approach, and they can essentially earn in-platform currency to be able to provide them with the credits to essentially utilize Wi-Fi. And how they get that currency is, whether it's filling out surveys, watching ads. I mean, there's multiple ways to go about doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key difference, is that, we didn't, often people say if it's free, if the product's free, then you are the product. And so we kind of wanted to change that thinking and go, we can create honest value exchanges with our commuters and say, we want to give you Wi-Fi, but we need to find out how to fund that. And we fund that through your interactions with our brands and our partners. And so you can choose how you want to do that. You can log in, you can, like you said, do ads, surveys, read news, whatever that looks like, however you want to spend your time. And we then put that into the Sebenza bucks, and you can redeem that for Wi-Fi. I think that's one of the fundamentals of our model and why it worked, is because we were also able to understand how much do we need to monetize the individual or the commuter in order to give them X amount of data. And so we built the model around that to make sure that we're not bleeding by just giving people Wi-Fi for not creating the value for us.
So to add to that, you look at the traditional models of other social media, and you're being served ad, and they're collecting data on you, but this happens in the background. It's not a direct exchange. And so you choose as the user how you want to enter Sebenza bucks. So you can decide if you want to watch ads, or you want to play games, or you want to even read the news. You can decide that. And if you're not comfortable with giving us, various data through our surveys, that's fine. You can earn Sebenza bucks in another way. And so we try and make a transparent value exchange. Nothing is free, but you can decide how you want to have that exchange with us.
So before we get deeper into the platform, the product, your customer base, just understand where this is kind of accessible, right? So you've done this through taxis and buses. There's no fixed locations that people can access your platform from.
Yeah, so technically you can access the platform just through any browser. But in order to get the benefits of the free Wi-Fi, you need to be in one of our 8,000 taxis or buses. So 7,000 taxis and around 1,000 buses nationally.
So, and just talk me through why the free Wi-Fi is the most critical feature of the value proposition to the users.
Yeah, so I think the reason, and we've got quite a few things that we've done in terms of research on this, is at the time when we were thinking about the product, we were the 169th worst country in terms of affordability for data. And so if you look at that, that's an astronomical number. On average, people were earning, let's say 5,000 Rand a month, and 400 Rand of that is going to data, because people don't buy, that's what our research indicated anyway. People don't buy, 5 gigs or 10 gigs at a time. People are buying 20 megs, a little bundle here, a little Wi-Fi, whatever WhatsApp, whatever they can get, through whatever income they have at the time that they have it. So I think we're trying to solve real problems and create something that's sustainable and good for people. And this is the most meaningful way that we could do it.
So I guess that's a great segue in terms of, just talk to me about the founding story. How did you guys how did you meet each other? How did you come up with this idea? Where did the concept come from? We'll get into what it was like to actually get this off the ground. I can't imagine that was easy, but just from the idea stage, how did you meet? Where did this idea come from?
So we met through mutual friends. One of my friends was living with Wes, and we ended up, like any good story, having a few beers and talking about just what we do. And Wes was kind of highlighting some really interesting problems that he was facing in the business that he was working at the time. And a lot of that was to do with the data, the lack of data and feedback that you get from activations and promotions, and actually that marketing piece, and not getting that feedback. And so, we just started talking about, how do we solve that problem? What does that look like? And it was one of the first times we ever met, but it was very clear instantly that we had a lot of those kind of same way of thinking, solving problems. And it was just always exciting to chat again and see what else we could solve, and actually ended up starting a business that could solve those problems. And that was the first business that we started together, Promoter Plus, which was activations, launching new products, and collecting data to understand who the shopper is, who are the users, who's not buying your product, why are they not? And so we started solving those problems using technology at that time. And I think that's kind of the, where it all began.
I find that so interesting just as a background, because I can obviously just see how that capability and skill set really plugs in nicely to what it is that you're able to offer to your customers. I mean, because just jumping ahead is it's like your customers would be media houses, anyone wants to do advertising, really. That's going to be predominantly the players. Instead of me running with assumptions, why don't you explain to me and the audience who your customers and actual market is? Where do you get your revenue from?
Yeah, and the revenue is focused largely, like you said, through people that want to engage with our audience, right? And so today it is largely advertisers, so a lot of people in FMCG, QSR, retail, fintech, financial services, things like that. So some of the brands that work with us, ShopRite, McDonald's, Blue Ribbon, Unilever. I mean, I think I can rattle off probably about another 50, but that's not the important thing, right? I think like we're trying to find a way to access, to give people access to a market that's largely untapped. Like if you look at, again, the disparity in terms of what the cost or the prohibitively high cost of data is, people aren't accessing these brands and the advertising that they hope to get through to the commuter market because the cost of that is too much. And so we're bridging that, and we've given them access to somebody that is sitting in a taxi, that is willing to trade their time for value, and we are facilitating that through our platform.
And so would your revenue model essentially work based on impressions? Would it be working on space? Obviously it depends. I mean, I know you'll probably have more than multiple different products because you'll have surveys, you'll either have research or it's actually advertising. Like, yeah, how does the revenue model work?
Yeah, so we align the revenue model to the digital advertising ecosystem, because you can't compete and say you're a niche product. And, it's a lot of lessons that we learned through scaling as well. We thought in the start, we can have a smaller user base, and because it's difficult to reach, people will pay niche prices for that. And then, we kind of quickly figured out that people aren't going to pay niche prices. And so, you sort of tapered it off, and then the game was it's always been a chicken and egg game for us. And the game was to prove enough scale to get enough funding to scale the business a little bit more, to get more relevant to those customers. And, I think we're at the point now where we have reached enough scale and we are getting the buy-in from people because we have enough reach to actually be relevant in those conversations.
And just in the minds of your customers, like what would be the kind of competition or substitutes for you? Would it be the likes of social media, TV? Forgive me with the lack of knowledge here on advertising, but like above the line advertising and marketing, billboards, etc. Is this what you're getting compared to in terms of spend? Like how does your customer go about thinking around the choosing to buy from you guys?
So we've positioned ourselves in the digital marketing sphere, because I think that's the one thing that from a unique selling point perspective that we have as well, is that we're completely transparent, we are measurable, and everything can be done digitally, which it hasn't previously been done in the mass market or in the commuter market. Everything is a billboard, and a billboard has an audience, and whether people look at your billboard or not, it's the footfall in the place that counts towards that metric. And so it's very difficult to actually see that return on investment, where we've gone the other way and said, we will give you click-throughs, we'll give you, all the digital metrics that matter to you and how you calculate return on investment.
To add to that, one of the biggest opportunities for us is that you've got a lack of ability to actually connect to the internet from the mass market, from our users, from most of South Africans, to go on every day and, actually engage. And so, if you look at budgets on Facebook and Google, the reality is that requires data. And I remember seeing a really interesting figure which said that on one of the popular news sites, 65% of the data used to run that site actually is to run the advertising that's being served. So you're actually paying to be served advertising yourself. The fact that it's free, means that you connecting to the platform, there's no direct cost to you to actually engage with us. And so that allows us to create a massive reach, longer engagement, and more meaningful engagement as well. And in a slightly better way that really makes makes it a meaningful time to be engaging with that person. You're sitting in a taxi, looking out the window, or you're on your phone. A lot of people are looking out the window because they don't have data. And so it also adds a lot of value to that commute. It means that you're happy to sit, and you don't mind if it takes a bit longer. One of the funny things about why taxis drive so fast, is because the commuters are saying, go faster, I need to go to work. They don't want to sit there in the taxi the whole time. People think it's the drivers, but it's not, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these interesting lessons we've learned from the industry and the preconceptions, but it's all kind of linked together to this experience, which actually isn't great. And that's our unique selling point in the market, to say you can't actually access this demographic in Google and Facebook reliably and consistently because of the data issue.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, you're also not one of the first players in the market to try provide Wi-Fi hotspots within transport services in the country, right? I think, but you're one of the ones that actually figured out a business model that's actually scalable and nailed your ability to do this, that creates value to every stakeholder that's involved in this in a way that makes sense to them. So I guess, going back to the origin story, is like, you spoke about how you met, you spoke about the first business that you went into. Where did the idea come from for Sebenza? And talk to me about how you launched that.
We sort of had this data business that we were building in the promotion space, and we had some ideas around one of our customers at the time, which is like a hotel chain. And we were like, how do we deploy Wi-Fi to increase our touch points, to get more data on people over time, understand user behavior patterns, things like that. And we just started looking into it, and then obviously this Wi-Fi in vehicles and taxis specifically came up. And I think I was 26 and Carl was probably 25 at the time, and we were like, as brazen youngsters, we were like, well, surely we can do this. This doesn't look too hard. I'm sure there's a way.
How hard could it be?
Yeah, sure. And
Said every entrepreneur ever.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was kind of the thing. And so we started down the road, just really looking at all the things that have happened. And, like to your point, there were many that have tried it, and they all failed for different reasons. And I think that was one of the key lessons for us, is like, you need to look at the competition, who's done what, why did it fail, what were the successes. And we looked at all of them and we said, well, everyone's trying to use off-the-shelf products. Everyone's trying to do a quick fix to just plug them in and people come, and that's just how it is. And it wasn't. And, like the lessons that we learned there were very key to us in formulating our business case and our product, by going, nobody else can do this in the way we intend to do it. And if we're going to do it, like, we have to invest in that. So we used, a lot of our income from a previous business and really started like investing in Sebenza from our perspective at the time, on the business case and doing the technology properly. Like, one of the very early iterations of it was like little 3G dongles that were stuck to the roof of the taxi, and you go, "Oh, cool, that's surely not going to work." So, our approach was very much to say, we want to champion the commuter, and the commuter needs to be the person that derives the most value from this in the start, because if there's no adoption, there's no business. And then how do we then obviously build the model around that? And that was pretty much it. We took our first prototype, I think, that we had developed over about a 12-month life cycle. We got early stage CTO, I guess. His name's Mottée, one of the very, very smart humans, like one of the smartest humans I've ever met. And, he's built complex financial systems in Myanmar and all kinds of like cool stuff. And, we sort of went to him and we said, we're early stage, we can pay you a little bit, but we'll also give you equity. And we need you to build this prototype. And so we did. And then we went to the rank and we tried to find a taxi driver that would let us put it in the vehicle. And we did. His name was Joe. So that's Sebenza Taxi AA. And we didn't know what we were doing there either. So we were like physically splicing into the harness of the taxi and wiring the things. And it was a nightmare. But I think that's how you learn.
So we're getting a little technical now. I just want to just so I can formulate an image in my head, right? So you're starting the business. I mean, there's like also the point that a lot of people are using off the shelf stuff.
Yeah.
Right? What do you mean there? I mean, you spoke about using a 3G dongle. I mean, are we like, let's separate the conversation to hardware, software. Like, like, did you realize that off the shelf hardware is fine, but off the shelf software is not fine, or is both not fine? Like, what did you actually have to like build and develop for your MVP?
So we started with going down the same road that everyone else went down, right? So we said, there are people that are trying to do this. Let's go and talk to them. So we went to speak to the guys. The hardware, we found out very quickly that there are OEMs that are doing it really well. And so building your own hardware doesn't make sense. And that's not where the problem lies. You just have to make sure it's robust, fit for purpose, and that it can live a life, because it's hard. Hardware lives a hard life in taxi. And so, we went to one of the guys and we said, cool, we want to make these changes because we think this is the key, like in our model, because it was different to theirs. And then they said, yeah, no problem. And
be specific, what changes?
Well, just the way that the Wi-Fi works, right? So instead of the traditional model where you come in, you watch ads and you get forced out, we wanted to create this opportunity for engagement, which is how our model works, right? You come in, it's a value exchange, you get rewarded, and then you get an open access as your reward. And, we set up with a developer, and the developer only speaks Espanol. And you're like, okay, cool. So it's not local, it's not contextual. People don't understand it. It's, it needs to be South African. It needs to be with our unique context in mind. And that's why we decided, well, hardware is there, it exists. We need to pick the right one because the commuter needs to have a good experience. Those little dongles, they go 3 megabits per second, and they can have a concurrency of 2, so the other 12 people in the taxi can't connect. And even the 2 that are connecting are having a bad experience. So we solved all of those key fundamental issues, and then we were able to actually get the thing going.
And one point, not using off-the-shelf software was important because we were changing so often. No one has really done it the way that we had. You can serve an ad and then give Wi-Fi. That was easy, but that we knew wasn't a platform that you could build a sustainable business off of. We always speak about silos, right? So, media is one, data is one, transactions are one, content is one. And so how do you create a rich ecosystem? And so getting that formula right took so many changes, try this, test that, and working with a third party just doesn't give you that flexibility. There was no formula that was proven out. We couldn't say, built this, we know it'll work. We had to figure it out.
So run me through those 4 verticals really, because again, what you said makes a lot of sense and quite simple. The fact that it's like, consume this advert, get access to internet. It's like, that is a model that's been around for ages. Obviously yours is a bit more kind of complex. Why the need for the different verticals, right? What are those different verticals? Like, just help me wrap my head around that.
I think fundamentally it comes down to the expense of the solution. We fund the device, we fund the mobile data that it runs off of. We put in the stickers. There's no income from the industry, from the driver, from the owner, and just media alone wasn't going to solve the scale issue. How do you make sure that you have enough to reinvest in the hardware and keep that growth? And so creating silos where we know we can do this in media, and media absolutely is a bread and butter. That is eyeballs equals revenue, quite a simple model. But we need to add on all of these other ones to create a model which can really scale over time. And so it was figuring out the media piece, but then, how do you make sure that there's content that isn't going to use all the data, because now we're paying for all the data in the vehicles. And so what kind of content is sticky and engaging, but isn't, just video, for example? Or how do you optimize it by storing some of that on the device so that it actually caches locally and you can watch from the local device instead of paying for the download every time? And so we're solving all of these issues every time as we open up these new kind of revenue streams. Data.
So, but before we go to data and then the fourth one, because the data I think would be pretty clear to figure out. Content and media, why are these different? I can understand media in terms of advertising, but explain the difference to me.
So content speaks to dwell time, to real engagement. For us, media is the means to an end, right? So that's how you earn your Sebenza bucks. But the question that we wanted to really solve was that, how do we make the platform the destination and not the way to get to your destination? So why would you want to stay on Sebenza and not use Sebenza to go to Facebook? And content is something that we really felt could get us there.
Yeah, and there are also unique opportunities around content specifically, right? Like terrestrial television, it's becoming more and more cumbersome. It's slowly dying, and people are moving to the digital era. But again, one of the barriers is the prohibitively high cost of data. And so, because we solve that, the opportunity to become a new distribution channel for people or for brands or content producers to actually get to the market makes sense. Even like radio as an example, all of that stuff is aging. Like it's going to be a thing of the past. To people, South Africa's not investing in the old infrastructure anymore. So over time, it will have to become digital. And so we well positioned or uniquely positioned to assist in that way.
Okay. So just for my sake of my understanding, just the example there for media would be McDonald's running an ad. An example there for the content would be watching EPL highlights.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got like partnerships. We're going to be running some really cool stuff in this year, which is, some really cool shows like Deal or No Deal, Wheel of Fortune. We've got Champions League highlights and Premier League stuff coming up. So it's really cool what we can do, and the partners. Again, the opportunity for us to distribute on behalf of partners is, I think, a really important way of thinking for us, because we want to partner. You can't do everything and be everything. And so that's just, again, one of the silos, which is natural for us to then, continue that to other silos.
I mean, before we get into these other silos that you mentioned, that's just so exciting from a scalability perspective, is because what you've done is end up like you're shaping an entire industry and markets, right? And you're creating this ecosystem, this digital ecosystem of people that, inherently weren't able to necessarily participate in digital consumption, just because it's like it was a complete means to an end and a necessity to, like, it's a human rights to have access to the internet now, but a very expensive one. Now to do that and you remove the cost, there's so much more that can be consumed on the go, right? Which is a huge amount of time that is spent by a significant proportion of our population. So I can just see that. The ad side is the obvious side. I think the content side is super exciting. So immediately what I'm thinking there is, look at DSTV and Showmax now. Instead of like the one route could be like, okay, well, we can try and cannibalize ourselves now and try create an interface that's a competitor to them. Or it's like, guys, do you want to just actually have this plugged in to this environment, and you've essentially got more viewers and increase your ratings at any point in time. So that's really cool. Can't wait to get into that. Talk to me about the data.
I think to talk about the data, I'll give you the problem statement, which is that the taxi industry as a whole is very underrepresented. It's a massive barrier. Companies are too scared to get into the space because what is the risk? How many users are on these vehicles? How often are they there? How much do they spend? What is their earning potential? And who are they fundamentally? And so whether it be partnering with the industry or launching products to the market, the reality is that it's a very data sparse environment. And so we have GPS units on the vehicles. So we geolocate, who's using the vehicles where and when. They never turn off, so they're on all the time, which means that we get people that are neighbors to the taxi drivers connecting to the taxi in the middle of the night, and get stories like my daughter got through her matric because she could connect to the internet to complete her assignments, and we never thought we'd be able to do this without connectivity. And so there's all of these touch points that you have on a national scale, that's really bringing a story together. And one of the big realities of this country is it is so context diverse. One solution doesn't solve all. It's so diverse in this nation, which is incredible. But it's also difficult to really scale products and to speak to your markets and to really understand that. And so having that geospatial element on top of the demographics, what are your interests, what content do you like engaging with, how often are you using the vehicle, and whatever else that we want to ask that you're happy to give us because you're getting Sebenza bucks for Wi-Fi. Could be, do you use this product? How close is the nearest, KFC to your house? All of these kinds of questions which brands and other services would love to know, but it's just not accessible, and we can really contextualize that and put it in a way that makes sense.
It's also really expensive, from a market research perspective. If you understand, how 250, 300 Rand, for one conversation with a person, that's typically what it costs, and we like a tenth of that. But also we're much more relevant, and I think we have a lot better data, because I'm not going to say the name of the thing, but there's one township data piece that goes out on a yearly basis that predicates its whole methodology on 1,500 respondents.
That's not representative at all.
That's my thinking. So, we do hundreds of thousands of data points a month, and so we really have the context of each individual kasi, each individual. It's really different to how people perceive it. Actually,
I can't remember what stand-up comedian I was watching, but he was basically talking about the don't ask the average person, because not only is it not the average person, it's like the average person that fills out a survey. Who the hell fills out surveys in their own spare time, right? It's like, this is not representative of the population at all. It was actually someone making jokes about Brexit, and I was like, don't ask the average person. But I think in this situation, is you've created a strong incentive to be able to collect this information. But I mean, just the geo mapping, geospatial, the language, it's fancy terms, but essentially, I'd imagine that data is just so exciting for like the issues around addresses and planning and logistics into townships and in kind of like informal town environments is one thing. But then from a logistics perspective, you're looking at but everything from mobility challenges to logistics to town to government. It's like the use cases just for that data is huge, guys. I think no wonder Mark, who introduced me to you, said this is a really epic business, because like now I'm getting into it. No wonder you're getting bombarded by ideas and opportunities. Like, that's a whole topic I really want to get into now, because just the amount of value that you could provide to different stakeholders is endless, and we're not even on your fourth silo yet. So now talk to me about what the fourth one is.
So the fourth one is transactions. This is what we're unlocking at the moment. So this is what we're really working on, and it's being able to move from basically as a business, a B2B business, to B2C, right? And to have a close relationship with our users, where we can provide directly these products and services through partners or through ourselves that they can then pay for. And one of the big, really exciting pieces of that is, the walleting aspect. And I think it's quite clear that the digital wallets, mobile wallets, hasn't taken off in South Africa as it has in the rest of Africa. You look at Kenya, and a lot of the other countries around Africa. And the question is why? And a lot of people will argue, including us, that it's because our banking system is quite advanced and that there's not a massive direct need. But if you look at the amount of cash that's going through this informal ecosystem, there is a need in that space to digitize. And for example, if a driver wants to buy a car, a taxi, and actually move up to an owner, that's a cash transaction. They don't have a credit record. They don't get pay slips. There's no direct formal engagement with the formal economy. And so banks, you work with credit ratings. You're never going to get into that space. And so you hear stories of guys with 80, 100,000 Rand under their mattress, because they just aren't part of the space. And so that's a massive opportunity for us to really start solving problems around safety, around ease, around cost of actually managing cash, where we can digitize these elements and actually create value for the industry and for the passengers themselves. And in turn, you're giving opportunities for your business partners to now, have a value exchange directly through the platform, as opposed to having to then go off and build it somewhere else and have that transaction happen elsewhere. And so, it's a holistic image, but we really think that starting with electronic fare collection, and Wes, I'm guessing you're happy for us to kind of talk about this. This is like a new development, but we're very proud of it and very excited about it, which is that, if you solve that fundamental problem of not being able to get on a taxi because the ATM isn't working, you can't go to work because you need cash. There's no alternative. Knowing that you're sitting, if you're in a taxi rank, you've got cash on you right there and then, and it opens you up to people bugging you. And this is a massive concern that we've found in our research. to also the difficulty of getting change when you're in the taxi, making sure that you're actually going to get the exact amount of change, because that's how much you need to get home. And so often people don't get the change and they have to ask someone for money. And it's a very undignified kind of experience having to use cash. And we're saying the technology exists, but it's access and it's trust in a brand that could deliver that. And we feel like we're at the point now in the business where we can solve these problems and create value with our partners. And the partners are the industry and businesses that we've been really working with over the last few years.
I've got a question that I want to ask that's going to get quite deep. But before I do so, there's one that I just want to really wrap my head around, because guys, what you've built is not only exciting, but quite a complex business now. So just to take a couple steps back to product market fit, right? What was that like first iteration? How did you know you had it? And how would you have defined product market fit for you?
It's really tricky. But I think, the people have always told us different things about our business, right? So when we describe the business to people, somebody with a specific lens could go, "Oh, actually, you guys are a data business," or actually, you guys are whatever media business, or whatever the lens is for that individual. And I think what we found was that the value comes in, and the reason that it's worked is because yes, media is today the leader. But we've created like this rich ecosystem, right? And it's not only through the technology, but it's also through the partnerships with the industry. Like if you think about it, like I don't know very many people that would be able to go to the taxi industry and just start, working with them. And like, so it took us a long time to get that right and to ingratiate trust with them and, really get to the point that the value is actually access, yes, through the technology, but also access to the industry. And like, that's one of the fundamentals, right? And so I think where we found the product market fit was really in going to bigger corporations that understands the value of the industry. It's 225 billion rand a year, and not knowing how to tap into it. And I think that's our secret, is we found out that everybody in that space wants to tap in to the market, but they have no idea of how to do it. And that's the connection that we formulated for people, well, for brands and for corporate specifically, to be able to interface with an industry that they've previously been unable to do.
Yeah, I think in other words as well, it's just we're a bridge. We're a bridge from incredible product solutions, brands, businesses, whatever that is, to be able to enter the space. And we obviously facilitate that digitally, and we make it free for them to do so from a data perspective. And that is the fundamental problem. I think also that we're a company for good. We're creating connectivity opportunities for jobs, like I said, about people being educated. I mean, we also have education courses on the platform to drive that awareness. We've always had a huge amount of excitement because it's a sustainable business from every aspect, right? It's great for the user. They don't have to pay for this connectivity. It's great for business. They can connect. And ultimately, you're adding back as well. So we take so much of that revenue we make, we put it back into the Wi-Fi, more routers, more connectivity, more access fundamentally. And I think that's just been a great rallying call that so many people are happy to get behind. And it's one of the reasons I love doing business in this country, is because I think we're real about the problems that we have. And there is a need and excitement to get behind good businesses, good projects. And I think it's also been a big key to our success, is let people kind of say, you know what, I've never seen this done, but it makes so much sense. And I think it'll be net positive. We'll back that. We'll give it a go. And we've relied on that.
Mm. So that's on the topic of bridge. It's a good bridge now to what I wanted to chat about. That is the complexity of your identity. Like now, when you've got all these silos as a business. I mean, Reg, you mentioned now, depending on the angle that you're looking at the company, is like, oh, you guys are a data business. Oh no, you're a media business. Oh, you're a you're a Wi-Fi company. And like from where I'm sitting, you are like providing Wi-Fi through South African public transport in order to give the population access to the digital world and then allowing companies that participate in the digital world to benefit from the people getting that access. That's probably like the simplest, like, but it's very meta as an explanation. Where I'm going with this now is that is how do you manage your identity as you continue to grow and scale, as you have grown and scaled, and you've added more of these silos in, and trying to explain this to stakeholders? How are you navigating this complexity of just storytelling and identity of your business?
I think people have always been drawn to the concept of ecosystems. And I think that's I think the nomenclature that we prefer is like we're an ecosystem, right? And all of these things can fit in there. But the ecosystem is much more broad than that, right? And it takes all of the stakeholders into consideration. So the commuter, the driver, the owner, the rank marshal, the PRO, the associations, everybody can gain from our ecosystem. And I think, that's where we try and peg our identity. So if we have new products and services and engagement methodology that we can add to the ecosystem, then great. If we can expand it beyond just taxis into buses, then great. But the value is that we have access and meaningful engagement with our users throughout our ecosystem.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also makes sense why I'd imagine focus can be quite a challenge, or at least prioritization. One of my favorite things that like we like to say in Metavolve is like we're not big fans of the word no, but we're huge fans of the word not yet. And so how do you navigate this when, especially, it's not just ideas that you could have when you're sitting on that much data about a really like unmeasured majority of the population, and one that's representative now of 5 unique million users in the span of a year, right? It's not ideas. It's actually just like conclusions based on data. And it's like, this is actually what needs to happen. So how are you essentially like, yeah, how are you navigating this challenge of your own product development roadmap? And how are you planning on scaling your offerings? Because like this, I can imagine this could feel endless.
Yeah, I think we spent a large part of today actually going through a lot of that stuff. But I always say that the best thing about our business is optionality, and the worst thing about our business is optionality.
Elaborate?
Well, so the best thing is there are all these opportunities, but the worst is that there are all these opportunities. So how do you take them, and how do you create like a hierarchy where you can make decisions on which one to go for? And I think what we focused on in the early days specifically was just getting mass adoption and like really making sure that people want the service and that we can get it out there to as many people as possible. I think we thought that it was, like a land grab, and the faster we can go, the better. And I think, I suppose, there are also other factors that are external that can lead that as well. And I think you need to keep your ear on the ground for those, like electronic fare collection as an example is something that's been on our sort of on our agenda for, I think, since we started the business. And it's just the timing was terrible. A lot of political factors, a lot of things that are difficult in those spaces to navigate. And when the timing is right, you need to keep your ear on the ground to know. And then that's when you need to prioritize those things. And so I think that's kind of how we've done it, is sort of off the cuff, but with an understanding or an idea of the things we want to achieve through those products and services, because you have to be responsible with your opportunities, specifically in our industry. You want to make sure, as the official partner for digitization for SANTACO, that you doing the right things and that you are bringing value into the ecosystem or into the industry without being extractive. And so we focused very much on that.
And to add to Wes's point, we kind of started with, we have to build it ourselves, because there was no one saying, we hadn't built a track record, we didn't have the big scale to attract all of these businesses that may be able to do it. And so we built out all of these products, services. We started calling them fast food apps, because we want to just build something, put it on the platform, see how it does. But we quite quickly learned you have to stick to what you know. And just because a music player can play music, it doesn't mean that is going to be what people prefer over getting the Wi-Fi and going to an established platform like Spotify. And so, we've learned to lean into other businesses more, and we actually opened up our ecosystem so that other players can come can actually live on our platform as well. Let them do what they do really well. Let that be executed incredibly well. We can add, the brand value, or add Sebenza bucks for engagement and bring in the data perspective and do the things that we do very well. But at the end of the day, we can't build everything. And I think that's been a fundamental shift in how we've approached the opportunities, is actually finding the right partner is the biggest piece and the hardest part that we've really found.
So that sounds like it's come off the back of a lesson. Talk to me about some examples when you've post product market fits, try to do it yourself, gotten burned, and realized it's like, actually, we need to stick to our knitting.
Sure. I actually don't know which one we should go for. There's been a few. Probably like music is a good example. We again, like access and users and all these things, like we think we can do something cool in the music space. It's expensive. Spotify's expensive. Data, all those things. And I think one of the lessons without giving it away too much is, we didn't really understand all the context of the music industry and rights issues and royalties and all these things. And we did it for about a year. Great, like really, expanding on the idea of content and how we get people to use Sebenza as a destination instead of the conduit to the internet. And, it all made sense. And, probably about a year into that journey, we started, getting some phone calls from some of the labels going, hey guys, I don't know if you know, but this can end in litigation. Like, it's best you stop. And so that's kind of one of the big ones, is that we immediately went, oh, okay, let's not do music anymore in the way that we have been.
Yeah, killed it pretty quick. I think with it, by the end of the day, Sebenza music wasn't a thing anymore. We created a meme generator. You can generate your own memes. We've done a jobs platform, which we're still very passionate about, but the execution and actually being able to get enough jobs on the platform and making sure it's a great user experience by partnering with someone else was
like
tricky.
JobJack.
And that's,
shout out to Christian.
yeah, great platform it is. And so there's been a whole bunch of bigger projects and smaller projects. I think music was quite a big one. We had a music studio in our office, and we'd have some big guys come in and record mixes, and we'd actually be listening and experiencing that mix. They'd be playing for us, but it's all recorded, would go on the platform. And the idea was that if you're getting in the taxi and you've got a 30-minute trip, listen to the 30-minute mix and kind of go on that journey with us. And it's such a cool idea. And I think we're still a bit bitter about how that went, but we certainly are looking for a way to kind of reactivate that, as well as so many other specialty jobs. Would be great to get on the platform again.
But I think that's the big shift, right? Is that like we learned through that experience that we can't do everything ourselves, but we were forced to in the start because people don't take you seriously. Like, more guys trying Wi-Fi, it's going to fail. People don't care about it. But, we're 5 years in, as probably our 6th year of being serious about Sebenza. The industry love us. We've made sure that every vehicle that's gone in is working and on time. And now we're at the point where we can go to partners and say, guys, we have this opportunity. Why don't you bring in your expertise and your value, and we can distribute that for you?
Yeah, so that's what you've done is really clarified my question around identity. Is that when you said you went from conduit to destination, now ecosystem, I think makes a lot of sense, because when you use the conduit, there's a transactional flow of value. It's like it's very unidirectional. But then when the moment that you move on to a destination, then it's like there's essentially no boundaries and limitations on what we should be doing. It's like, how do we get people on this platform? But it's like, okay, cool. Well, we could be our own media, our own content, our own radio, job platform. It's like what is it that we can offer for this ecosystem? And then you just go like completely off track. And it's like, actually, then you need those situations where you get burned. It's like, oh, what are we actually? What is our vision? Are we like trying to become everything to everyone just because we can? Or do we provide access? And I think what that then answers is like, actually, you provide the ecosystem. And it's how is it that you get this ecosystem to operate? But that provides you in an interesting position where you can shape and you can move in terms of what's happening, and you can kind of control the ebb and flow and the timing. I think what makes a more unique challenge there is what is essentially the shared value look like with each different type of partner, because an ecosystem can exist with like an absolute plethora of different types of businesses providing different value. But how is it that now you get remunerated? Because on the ad side of things, pretty straightforward model. Now you're getting into an interesting, unique point where it's like, okay, well, we're not coming up with it ourselves, but every new type of partner requires its own new thinking around a business model, because that's there's different stakes and value here, which is, I think, a very interesting space to be. And I imagine one that was definitely not foreseen.
Yeah, definitely not
think it
foreseen.
was. I think it was.
You think so?
Yeah, I think we've always had the idea of like all these silos and the optionality that we created, but like we've just never, we weren't able to execute, and we would never be able to execute in all of the opportunities. So I think we've always had it. I mean, if we go back to the early days, it was never just media for like eyeballs for Wi-Fi. It was always an idea that we could bring in digitization into the environment, but we just didn't know what that looked like until we got here.
Yeah, actually, I remember we had at one point, we had 14 silos, which we thought we could activate. And, a lot of those are still kind of sitting around. There's probably more now.
And you're a 5-year-old company. No, guys, epic. I love what you're doing. I really understand what you mean now. It's about the greatest strength and greatest weakness of yours is optionality. It's because we can say yes and make it work like relatively easily, but it's like, how do we progress? How do we move something forward when, any option looks like it could succeed, which is a very nice problem to have, for the record, as I'm sure you guys well know. So guys, there's also something you threw out there that's quite a important piece of information, but you said that you are the digitization or digitalization. Those are important distinctions, but the digitization partner for SANTACO. You said that like it's cool. Let's carry on with the story. That's a big deal. First of all, talk to me about how you managed to get a partnership of that level and what that actually means for you and has meant for you since you got it.
Yeah, so I think, we start with all the way back in the day, trying to figure out, I think that was a lot of the failures that we saw, where that everybody went to the heads of, an industry, association, and then you get introduced to this guy and that guy, and they start with, in order to have this conversation, there's something called the mvula mlomo, which is like the mouth opener. So before you can have a conversation with me, you got to put something on the table, right? And so we had quite a similar experience, and so what we decided very early on was that we want to do grassroots up. So we're going to go in there and we're going to just figure it out as we go. And so, we started with like 30 taxis in Hammanskraal, and we just went to that association, had the conversation, did the deals, whatever. Then we went to a rank marshal in Northgate. I don't know if I can say his name, I'd rather not. But anyway, he still phones us, and like we're still like cool with him. And we said, look, we just want taxis. Can you just bring us taxis? Just put them in, like, let's figure it out. And, then we sort of got to a scale where I think people started to take notice of us and phone us and be like, listen, what are you doing? And then we obviously looked at it and we went, okay, we need to find partners, either within the industry or that play in the industry that can help us have the correct conversations. We think there's something here. We think this business is going to be meaningful. How do we do this? And so then we got like one of our investors now. He's quite prominent in the industry, and so he took us to the bosses or the powers that be within the industry, and we basically, we had the whole song and dance to say, I think what the differentiator was is that we're not being extractive. We're not coming here to take something from you. We're coming here to create value. And I think, in the start, it was like, cool, let's do a pilot. We give you a few hundred taxis here and there and whatever. And proving ourselves through those POCs gave us the opportunity to go back to them and say, guys, we've been here, we're around, we do the things we said we're going to do. We scaled to the number that we said we're going to scale. We've created the value that we said we're going to create. And through that, sort of relationship building over time, we were afforded the opportunity to become the official partner for Digitisation. And that's something that we hold really dearly today, and maybe while it's quite, so we're just like, it's fine. We did that. It was probably 4 years in the making, of really making sure that we deliver on our promises to the industry.
And to think about when we sat there and we gave the whole song and dance to the guys that really make decisions about what the industry is going to do as an industry. It was really difficult because there's probably been 20 companies that have tried this before. I mean, the idea of putting Wi-Fi in a taxi, which certainly wasn't new, but we took the opportunities that we had, and we were winning while other guys were losing. And so there was other players at the time, but they just started dropping off because it is quite a difficult business to get right, and we were getting it right. And so there was more trust and more, okay, we'll try 1,000. Okay, cool. Go into KZN now, and right, we'll introduce you to the guys in Cape Town. And so we really leaned on them for support to go national. We work with 126 different associations. I mean, it's a huge amount of different players, but it wouldn't really be possible without the support, from SANTACO, and that's really what we've leveraged so much. And it's now we have trust within the local associations and with the drivers and with the owners, and I think that's one of the biggest assets we have as a business, is that we have relationships at every level, and so it takes a lot to launch a product or a business. And you need buy-in from everyone, and adding value everywhere is what's allowed us to do that.
I think that's actually a very useful segue to something that I realized I did forget to ask, given how we actually got introduced to one another. We haven't spoken at all about your investors. I mean, you've brought them in a couple of times, but I mean, you've got more than one investor. I mean, there's D&I or digital ecosystems, but I mean, this is like as private equity gets. And I find it very fascinating what they're doing is starting to invest in startups. But yeah, I think besides obviously the capital required for your operations and for the hardware that you have, and then also just again, maybe, well, even from the original stages, you had the MVP from a software perspective. So and you had the capital from your previous business to do that. You obviously need the capital to kind of scale all this hardware. But it's not just that. You talk about network. What have your investors really been able to bring to the table that you wouldn't have been able to do without them?
I think fundamentally 90% of the things you acquire will come from the partners you choose. Like, I really do believe that. And like, we've been very fortunate to have incredible investors, even from the early stage where Carv and I didn't understand much. And, you start to the first lessons where you're like, cool, corporate governance. And you're like, oh, what do we need to do that for? Like, we're not a corporate, we're a startup, who cares? The worst C word you can say is corporate, And very, very quickly you figure out like your shareholders need to understand like what is the business doing? Is it making money? Is it losing money? Like, at a very like, sort of microbial level. But the network that we have access to, and you mentioned, D&I and Digico, they've been incredible in the scale phase of our business. They joined us on our journey in December of 2022. It took us about 8 months of ourselves doing due diligence and speaking to like Dion and like a lot of the other founders around those investors, and what we come to find is that they're incredible partners. They're fair. They open up opportunities for us that we would not have been able to access without them. The lessons that you learn, the mentors that are available in those businesses, you just think about just the CEOs of those businesses, the chairman, Andrew Dunn, Ryan Noach, Ross, Fent, Ziad Mani. You can go on and on and on, and there's so many of the guys, and you can learn lessons from them. And ultimately, they've just been incredible. And throughout every phase of our business, we've had all our shareholders that have backed us again and again. When things have been tough, we said no to quite a substantial offer, and I'm not going to disclose who it was from. In the end of 2021, very institutional capital, let's say. And our investors at the time backed us, and they completed the whole round for us instead of us having to take this offer, which ultimately I think would have killed the business. And like, that's the kind of thing that you need, right? Like, your investors, I wouldn't like, given the opportunity to do it again, I wouldn't change anything, because the investors have been incredible without just focusing on capital. Like you can choose, there's a lot of guys that'll throw money at you, but picking your partner on values and on value they can bring outside of capital, I think is very important.
Yeah, the concept of smart money and dumb money. We've never taken dumb money. We've never taken money for the sake of money. It's always been to follow strategic goal, and can you help us get there? And a business like the DNI, which has so much experience in the tech space, has so much access to huge brands, and they understand what it takes to get a business going. This corporate governance and expectations that were put on us were all completely new, but we see the value in what we had to do when we did that deal, and to really follow that path to become a subsidiary of that business. There's a huge amount of work, and one might say it's split focus, but actually that's exactly what we needed at the time, is to, like you said, think about the corporate structures, think about who you're hiring, think about the how do you reduce staff turnover, and that was incredibly useful lessons to learn. And we had support along the way, existing policies, people that could give us advice, which was invaluable.
So guys, we've spoken a lot now about some of the strategic complexity, right? So just of really understanding the business, how you've scaled, and all these the complexities of your business. Let's talk about the operational complexity, because at the end of the day is like, you've still got hardware in all these different places. I mean, you've got suppliers that are supplying this hardware. You've in-housed your own tech and software capability, but there's the installation, there's the maintenance required. There's still the presence and the relationships that you need with not just like the taxi organizations, but like there's just so many moving pieces, right? And from my understanding, you're a super lean team. How can you be countrywide with that many operational moving pieces? Like what are some of the things that you really struggled with and that you learned in this period of the past couple of years?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been done painstakingly, right? Like trial and error, coming up with new ideas and ways of doing it. And I think over the last, we've been deployed in more than let's say more than 1,000 vehicles for the last almost 4 years. And so, with scaling, we've learned lessons. You start by, like I was alluding to earlier, we spliced into the actual physical harnesses of the taxis. And so you have to go and cut open the loom, and you take your little wire and you coil it around there, and then you tape that back together. And then we pop the taxi.
Just even that, what are you actually attaching it to? Because I can physically imagine it's like you're going to like the
loom is like
of a vehicle.
So the harness is all the wiring for the whole vehicle. So we used to take one of those wires and slice it open, and then cut away the plastic, and then take our little power cable and wrap it around that, and then tape that.
So that it's attaching to the power source of the battery of the vehicle.
Yeah. So that's how we started. And then we popped our first taxi. Must have been mid-2020.
First taxi.
Well, the thing wouldn't start. It wouldn't fire. Like we scrambled something and we didn't know what it was. And
so you actually prevented the taxi from being able to start.
Yeah, and you only do that once.
Oh,
I can promise you that.
Yeah, you only do that once.
So we had to tow this thing to the nearest auto electrician, and phone the owner and tell him about that, and pay the owner for his time, and pay for the repairs, and pay for the driver for his time, because now he can't make an income. And so you only do that once, and then you quickly figure out, actually we need to do something different here. And so we developed like a loom system where you literally plug one thing out of the PCI board, plug it into the router, plug that back in, and then earth the device, and you're done. So the whole installation process now is less than 10 minutes. I think refined from about 45 when we started. And so, again, like we're looking at uniquely South African requirements, which are like, the taxis don't want to sit around and wait. You can't pay them for their time. They need to be operational. So we catch taxis in line on their way to making money. So it's no downtime. There's no complexity for them. They don't have to, forego anything to get Sebenza. And I think that's an important piece from an installation perspective. But how we've managed to keep it lean is by really investing in our technology and understanding on, how do we actually create a meaningful backend to monitor and to do maintenance as remotely as possible. We've had some really cool things developed over the last few years. So one of them is like a buddy system where a router that's functioning, that's online, will actually, if it comes across one that's down, it will start to diagnose it itself and start pinging it with commands and saying, how do I switch you back on? And so those are the kinds of technologies that we've implemented to keep as far away from those taxis as possible, because as you'll know, if you have a truck roll, you start losing money. So we don't want to be, constantly maintaining those things physically. And so we've done as much as we can from a monitoring and maintenance perspective remotely.
You want as close to zero downtime as possible when you're doing anything that is in movement, transport, mobility, logistics. It's like that thing must not be sitting still ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's really fascinating. I guess maybe for the techies listening to this, they would have maybe understood a bit more about what you just said than I did. But like besides the creating automated ways to essentially diagnose and maintain your hardware, what are some of the other operational complexities you've had to navigate at scale? Because I mean, I can imagine the operational complexities of less than 1,000 versus now 8,000, very different realities.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think maybe one of the fundamentals is partnering very closely with the industry as well. So, like Cobb said earlier, we have 126 associations that we work with. And in the early days, one of the biggest problems that we had is like, you can't really get that driver back once he's gone. And so by creating models that were sustainable with the industry, we said, if you guys can help us do that and get people like to be more inclined to want to come and get the system back up, we'd remunerate you for that. And so, that's how our model works, right? Is we pay the industry per vehicle, per month, to the different associations, and you claw back if they're offline, or you can actually, earn more if you help keep them online. So just by aligning our partners, we were able to really get that to a space where, operation is really difficult to try and phone a driver. Where are you? Where can we come see you? All these things, but actually bring it down to your partnership agreement and go, that's how we plan to fix that.
Sure. I mean, that's, as an outsider who knows absolutely nothing about your business, what I'm identifying now is your secret sauce is your ability to get, primary stakeholders in your ecosystem to take ownership of their role of the ecosystem. So whether it's the actual users in terms of the fact that it's like, I'm owning my part, I'm consuming this content in order to be able to engage. You've got the taxi associations, I'm doing my part of making sure that the hardware is installed. And you've incentivized everyone to be able to do that. I think that's incredible. And you got no psychologists in your team, eh? You're just really smart guys.
Wow, geez, I don't know. I think just very brazen guys, very young at the time, but you figure it out, right? I think the fundamental part of what we achieve here is we're not being extractive. We're not trying to get something. We're trying to say, guys, we can make this work, and I think we can create real value for everyone in the ecosystem if we figure out how to work together.
Yeah, I mean, that also explains how you've got a team of just over 50 people. I was just trying to think about operationally being countrywide, physical maintenance required to do this. It's just not possible to have a team that small doing that with those kinds of numbers, which is huge. Now I'm curious about your actual organizational structure. What are your main functions? Like, what does ops look like? What are the different teams that have got the most full-time employees in your business? Like, what are the main capabilities you need to invest in from a human capital perspective?
So the two biggest departments is definitely ops, which is very much around maintenance and supporting uptime of the routers, and then dev or tech ops, technology. Those are the two biggest ones. I think they each have a complement of 13 in tech ops and about 17 or 18 in operations. And yeah, those are the two very, very difficult ones. Like, because again, we tried the third party approach, and there's some things that you just can't outsource, and then we learned that with those two departments. Not saying that we won't ever in the future, but as a team, as a core focus, those are the pieces that we felt were very important. The uptime of the routers and the ability to access the platform and the quality of the platform and the experience was obviously the two that drove that decision.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's critical. Talk to me how sales works in your business. Again, there's like a structure and human capital perspective. It's like, because if you have all those silos, I can't imagine it's just you two guys going to all of these different kind of industries all the time? What have you standardized? What playbooks have you created? What are you guys leading? How do you split that up from a sales perspective?
So we're very much focused. I mean, again, like the bread and butter of our business today is media. And so we built out our own media team that are capable of actually going into different agencies, brand direct, all those things. But obviously in the future, the focus is not to do this all ourselves and to do those sales. We're trying to look for partnerships that will allow that for us. So I think a lot of our investors have also been critical in that sphere. Networks that are incredible, that are at their disposal, that they happily open for us and given us the opportunity to put our product in front of people that matter. And I think that's been one of the huge successes for us.
Yeah, I can just imagine. I'm just thinking of those three main silos, like with media, content, and data. Is it's just looking at like the sales and account management. Looking at that, is it's also there's different levels and different levels of complexity. Is like someone who's going to be at the content side, like negotiating with like a proper content house versus like a media buyer for advertising space is like two very different things, very different complex products. On the data side of things and where that can be used in the different industries of where that's going, like, is that still quite emergent for you guys? Do you have any like CRO that's going to be operating here? How are you structuring the business in that sense? Do you look at it as like this is different business units? Like, how are you thinking about how you're going to keep scaling this moving forward? Is like once you've gotten to like 150 people in inverted commas, like how do you create these self-sustaining sales? And so that's a future related question, but like how are you thinking about the self-sustaining sales within each of these silos, especially as you're strategically focusing on building out other silos at the same time?
Yeah, so I think the most important part of that is creating sustainability in each silo. Like we don't want to create, let's call them P&Ls for lack of a better term, right? We don't want to create P&Ls that start bleeding the main business. And so when we're setting them up, that's sort of what we have in mind, is how do we create sustainability? Is it going to be a partner that can take us there? So like we are busy negotiating a deal for our data so that we don't actually have to take that to market ourselves, but rather have a partner that is established in that space that understands the value, number one, they can get, and number two, that we can actually deliver for them. And what that looks like. We can't learn every industry, every way of selling. Like I think it becomes quite cumbersome. So as an example, we've got an agreement with Prime Media on how we do content. And so they're bringing us content. We have an agreement with African Podcast Network that are going to be bringing us the podcast into our environments. And so we're trying to find a way, not everything will work and not one like size fits all here, but very much look at like, where do we need to derive value and where are the experts, So I would see it as we have these P&Ls, we need to create the value through those P&Ls, and they can either be through partnerships or we could invest in that sales channel and build those teams. But definitely they need to be self-sufficient and they need to create value for themselves and ultimately then for the business.
So even in that, I just want to get your like learnings on relationship handover. So I'm just thinking from the media space, again, especially with your background, I think that was something that came more easily to you because you develop a lot of specific knowledge in that space. But now getting into the content side and specifically the data, I can obviously wrap my head around what you mean with the partnership with Prime Media, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around the strategic or even operational relationship, like the decision making, the conversations, having meetings with them, even as a partner. Like they might be essentially operating as an aggregator of content in that situation, but you still need someone managing that relationship on your side. Like I imagine when it's like that relationship first started, it's one of you guys, then you hand over to someone else. How do you have any good examples of where you found that relationship handover to be quite challenging? I'd love to hear how you navigated that.
In like the media space specifically, or?
So if I had to just equate this to, doesn't have to be so specifically media space, but it's just having different P&Ls. It's about that, like as founders, we start the business off, and when we're less than 10 people, we have pretty much every strategic relationship that there is. Once you've got to a team of 50 people, and now you've got multiple different P&Ls, and you're operating different markets, and strategically your focus area is on building in new silos at the same time, you just can't have the same level of relationships with the customers that you've had for these years that you used to. Like you need to be able to hand these relationships over to someone else within your team that you can trust without damaging the customer experience, the relationship that they have with you. right? So how do you, like, that's what I'm just trying to understand, where the demand on your guys' time is with your customers, and how you've been able to develop that, but then also hand it over to someone within your team as well.
I think what we've done really well is we've hired well. And I think that's one of the best things that you can do, right? Is like, instead of trying to take it on yourself or feel anxious about handing over things like that, like, make sure that you're getting experts in that field that you can hand it over to. So, in terms of operations, we brought on an incredibly good chief operator, and we're very comfortable to say, cool, our supply relationships can live with him because he has the capacity and understanding and the knowledge to actually carry that on. And then very similarly, within the media space, we've got some incredible media people that we've brought on over the last sort of 6 to 8 months that understand it, that have the context, that know what our value proposition is, that already have existing relationships as well in all of those spaces. And I think that's kind of what we'd like to foster as well, is like every new silo we'd want to create a champion for, whether it be internal or external, but you need that person that really gets it, that really can bleed that, and live that on a daily basis.
And what we've seen is necessary. You said it yourself. It starts with us. There'll be an opportunity through a conversation or an introduction, and you start to understand that there's an opportunity there for a partnership. And you need to then go and build out the models. You need to do market research. You need to make sure that this silo, this approach, this partnership makes a lot of sense. Then it's often getting buy-in, going proposing what that solution could look like to that other party, and often, we'll do that. And once you've got a commercial arrangement that gives commitment to the partnership, you'll have the other people kind of there, but that is what we do well, so we can create opportunities, contextualize them, and then we really are working with our teams to kind of operationalize that project, which has been mapped out. We understand what the levers are, and we know where the risks are, and that gets communicated, and then we're there for support. But ultimately, that team has what they need to go and execute that. And I think that's at that point we step away and we say, okay, what's the next opportunity? And that's kind of how we operate.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I've often heard is around, like, theoretically the 50 mark is when the kind of structure that you have and the way you operate in your culture before that versus after that can often feel like two very different things, right? What's your experience of that?
So we're on, I'd say, 10 to 30 to, around the 50 mark. And of course, we can't speak to over 50. We would like not to have to. I mean, more people in the team just creates more complexity, spend so much more time trying to deal with things that actually aren't core to the business, but just around people. And so I think ultimately we'd like to maintain, a small team and leverage optimization and technologies and other pieces and outsourcing as well, to keep that culture really strong, because our culture is something that's so important to us as a business. And it's often the first thing people say when they walk into our office, or they walk out after walking through, and people get up and they say, how's it? And introduce themselves. And, we are just people first. And I think that's so important to keep. And you hear story after story of successful businesses losing that, but that's where the innovation and the passion and the drive to get success and, actually make it work where no one else really has, that's where it comes from. And I think that's something we protect, as much as we can. But of course, it gets difficult. And, we meet every challenge head on, but we definitely make sure that we take it very seriously if we start to erode that culture. And we put a huge amount of emphasis on keeping that strong.
Rez, anything to add?
Yeah, no, not really. I just think that, it is a challenge. And we had a interesting experience with that. Like, I think quite early on when we were moving from, let's say 15 or 10, like the very early stage guys, to like 30. And we actually had 6 to 12 months of like getting rid of maybe 10, 15 people. I say getting rid, that's a terrible way of saying it, but, just like restructuring the organization, just purely because of that, because, maybe culturally not a good fit, maybe work ethic not the thing that we want, maybe the focus on, different things. And it's not necessarily performance related, but just that the culture was not the right thing. And so we went down again to, 18 to 20 people, and now we're back up to 50 odd, whatever we're at the moment. I don't do a head count every morning, but, we built a strong culture and we prioritize that, so just because you're good at your job doesn't mean necessarily that you'll be a good fit for us. And sometimes it's difficult to ascertain that in conversation when you're getting people on in the first place, And so, I think there's a lesson that we learned is that sometimes you have to shrink a little bit to grow again and really just maintain that priority on your culture.
What we did was we really emphasized the process of psychometrics and making sure people can do what they say they can do and doing the background checks. And, it takes so much longer to hire someone, 3 or 4 times longer, but we realized it's worth the investment to make sure that person's right. Where before, we got a good vibe, they kind of seem to gel, but we quickly realized, that we're not psychic and we don't actually know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely critical. And it's spoken to the points of what I was really getting into was a lot of how is it that you've navigated decentralizing decision making. So when you start getting to this point, especially when you've got multiple P&Ls, when you've got multiple kind of client relationships, where you've got all these different strategic priorities and you've got a team of like 50 people now, it's like you need other people to make decisions. Obviously, just like this is where I like simplicity, is just hiring really well. But hiring really well is kind of complicated, right? And there's like, and you've built a solid approach towards hiring in the early stages. But I think for what you're saying, besides the cultural impact that naturally changes as your business starts to formalize, it's also just the reality of the nature of the jobs change. Is like when you're 15 people or less, everyone's a Swiss Army knife. When you're getting over that, is like you need to transition into a structure that has more specialized roles. And people that are good Swiss Army knives don't fit well into people that are specialized roles, and vice versa. So it's like it's not necessarily a cultural thing that becomes an issue. It's an organizational design problem that the people just don't fit. The people in the design no longer fit each other.
100%.
So guys, we've spoken a lot about the past, kind of about the present, just everything that you've got going for you. Talk to me about the future, right? So we're right at the beginning of 2025 now. What does the year look like for you guys? What have you got ahead of you, and what have you got planned?
Yeah, global domination. No, it's I think we're very much focused on developing the transition for us from that platform mentality to the ecosystem. Like opening up the opportunities, making sure that we're delivering the value to all of the stakeholders again, and really doubling down on the idea of the ecosystem. Like electronic fare collection is a huge thing in our world this year. But just more than that, I think there's 11. I think Calvin can look at them. I think there's 11 bubbles on that mind map there. But it's really just focusing on is only 9. Okay, good. It's really focusing on that ecosystem and really getting the unpacking the intrinsic value that lies in that.
Yeah, I think also one of the big objectives outside of the tech and what the users will see on the platform and in terms of utility and UX and UI and all those really exciting things, which of course we always revisit and add to, is scale as well. We should be doubling our fleet, so very aggressive scale this year, and it's something that we're very confident in by now. The biggest barrier to scale what is understanding how to optimize that, get it from the 40 minutes to the 10 minutes, and also how to fund that, and what are the good routes that you should be targeting. We've built the relationships, we understand the routes, we've really got the system very well polished. We monitor these things, so we're in a very confident position to really boost the impact and really focus on the partnerships we've created and add more taxis to those existing routes, as opposed to going and looking to go out more nationally. We want to double down on the places that we know are working and the partnerships with associations that we know are really creating value. It's a lot to do.
It is a lot to do. I mean, that's the nature of being at proper scale stages. I think you've gotten the business to an amazing point now, but it's one of those feelings where I can imagine this only still feels like the beginning.
Always.
So guys, I think that's Calvin, as you've listened to a couple of these, you know what's coming now. Gents, what's the one question that I haven't asked you, that I should have asked you, that you'd like to answer now?
I know this always stumps everyone, and I didn't prepare one, so I feel like a fool. Maybe, Wes, do you have one?
No, it's an unpreparable question. That's the whole point of it.
It's difficult to pose the right question, but to speak about the network, and Wes certainly touched on it, but at every stage, maybe the question is posed as, did you feel like you could solve all the problems yourself, or did you need, and to what extent did you need other people to kind of come in? So I think when people think of founders and people that started something, they assume that we solved all the problems the whole time. And I don't think we could do that to our egos and say that's the case. It's certainly not. And one of the biggest value adds that we got across the line was just having a network of people that really believes in us and the business, and them helping us solve problems, meet people that can actually help us drive the business forward. And we've always, being young, we haven't learned all the lessons ourselves. And so I think we very much rely on other people and bouncing things off. And, we're certainly not the kind of guys to say, okay, this is what I think, this is what we need to do. We really see value in 1 + 1 = 3. And I think that kind of thinking is something that's super important to always kind of consider when you're doing the impossible. Is you can't do it alone, and don't think that because you don't have the answers that you're not going to get there.
But I guess, guys, just to end it off, any final words, any final thoughts just to share with me, our audience, just about your journey of being entrepreneurs with an amazing business that you built so far?
Well, just to say thank you for the opportunity. I think it's really cool being here and able to kind of share these stories in an interesting way. I think it's, again, you've got to be careful not to make it boost your ego too much. The fact that someone like you's got such a great track record and has had so many incredible people sitting here wants to chat to us. But I would really like to put a call out to say that, if there's any opportunity to really make an impact and to make a sustainable impact in your life using business, you will get support from people. People want to be out there for good. And at the end of the day, you need to make money as a business, but you also need to think about doing that the right way. And I think that if everyone did that, it'd be a very different place. And we all have a shared responsibility, and I think we're very passionate about that. It's Sebenza.
Good luck topping that, Wes.
Yeah, no. Cam, thank you for having us on. Like, it's been an absolute pleasure. And if there's anybody that also, wants to share some stories with us, then please feel free to tag us in your stories. I'd love to hear more about, other entrepreneurs that are going through similar things. And, I think your platform is incredible for us to be able to share that and our experiences as entrepreneurs. They can get lonely, and having those conversations, always helpful.
Thank you, gents. I appreciate the kind words, and I'm sure every founder out there resonates as well. Well, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for an epic and very fascinating episode. Can't wait to see what you continue to do with the awesome businesses you built.
Thank you, Cap. Thanks, Cap.
One thing that wasn't recorded during the podcast, but when we went offline, we just had a bit of a conversation around growth strategy theory. Because the reason why I shared it with them is when you're navigating this many options around how you can continue scaling the business, I thought it would be helpful to just show them, the difference between organic growth and horizontal integration, geographic expansion, vertical integration, and diversification. And we just had a good chat around what it can look like to navigate this complexity, and when the likelihood of success with pretty much any option that you choose, how is it that you really choose the right one without over increasing the complexity of the business? The conversation didn't really last very long, but it was the reason why I point this out in the recording and the conclusion is that this is what we do. This is why I love having this podcast, navigating complexity, giving people knowledge, information on how to develop strategy for scale is pretty much what we do. So if you want to have a couple minutes with me, like I did with these guys, just chatting around scaling strategy, growth strategy, understanding the difference, how to go about you're thinking about navigating complexity, what the right path is to go down, that's what we do, right? So if you want to have that chat conversation with me, or if you want to have a recording of me chatting about growth strategies, either way, reach out to me, let's have a conversation, or ping me and tell me that this is some content that you want to see. Maybe I'll create it and put it out there. But either way, thank you for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. It's absolutely great to have you here. Thank you for your support. It means the absolute world to me. And if you'd like to support us, the best way to do so is just to like, comment, follow, subscribe, and share this podcast with other people in your network. It's the best way to support us, and it's also the best way to make me feel happy as the host of this podcast. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for being an amazing audience member, and I will see you next time. Cheers.